So we're going to move on now, and you will be very pleased to hear we're going to have the panel discussion. So get your questions ready, have your hands up, and make sure you pick our brains. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Hi. Oh, sorry. I think I'm in a...
Probably keep it a little lower.
I'm trying to prevent something from happening. My niece is 11, soon to be 11, and several influences, female influences in her life are kind of dropping little transgender hints. And I'm trying to figure out, do I say anything to her? Do I broach this subject with a child who has no dysphoria, but she's got doctors and teachers who are like, maybe it's this. So do I start the conversation with her to let her know that this is bullshit?
Okay.
We'll take two more, yeah. We'll take two more questions and then we'll answer them all together.
Hi, as the parent of an autistic daughter, I can tell you that it's hard to find clinicians that understand autism. There's no treatment available, if you ask me. I live in Massachusetts. That's a place where families with autistic children, they come for the services, but still it's difficult to reach this population. And when you put the gender problem on top of the autism problem, you're in a pretty intractable place. And I really would like to change the way that autism and gender identity are discussed, because right now they say, well, of course, that makes so much sense that you're trans because you're autistic. So of course that's the way that it is. And we really need to change that. And I'm looking for Genspect's help in leading the charge on how to reach autistic children and young adults.
We'll go ahead maybe with these two questions first, and then we'll take a couple of more. Does anybody want to start? Yeah.
Well, first of all, in terms of prevention, I would definitely recommend a new book that just came out called When Kids Say They're Trans. No, actually, I think it might be helpful, but I would say that, just in general, I mean, I think you said this was a niece, so it's a little trickier than being, I'm not sure where that puts you, but in general, what I say to parents when they come in is, I say, look, this is really serious. This is the fight of your life. It might be that she sails through it. That happens, but the stakes are really high. So if it were me, I would take it really seriously and start and get on it early and start to address it and put things in place and that kind of thing. So that's my answer on that. On the autism one, I just want to mention that the Gender Exploratory Therapy Association is hosting a webinar with Susan Bradley, who is an expert on autism and gender dysphoria. And that will be later this month. And you can go to our website, genderexploratory.com, and all are welcome to come to the webinar. So.
Anybody else?
Well, I think we ought to prioritize autism also, number one on the list, if, and gender dysphoria secondarily. But regardless of the psychological problem, I think patients benefit from the therapist's capacity to grasp the mechanism of suffering. And the mechanism of suffering in many autistic people is that they're friendless and they feel isolated and they're in pain not because they're simply autistic in some embryologic developmental way. They're in pain because as they try to negotiate the socialization process in junior high school and high school in particular, they feel isolated. And what you and I know about adolescence in general is that adolescents depend very much on their identity exploration in terms of their relationship to peers. And autistic human beings often have very limited peer relationships, and forget about bullying per se. They just don't have the capacity or haven't found the bonding process with a peer or a peer group. And that's the source of suffering. And I offer that as a hypothesis as to why one is motivated to reestablish the sense of self in the opposite gender. That may not be right. That's a hypothesis, but it at least helps the person understand the motivation for the creative solution.
If we could. Yeah.
Oh, hi. Welcome to Denver. I live here, so I hope you guys like Denver. I have a 16-year-old son, and he says he doesn't want to go trans or anything like that, but he also says, but I don't necessarily want to be a man because I see the toxic stuff that's all around him. And so I'm not sure what I say. I told him, well, you just prove everybody wrong and you be a good man when you become an adult. But what else can I tell him just to give him hope that he can still become a good man, even though, and he says, I don't want to be a girl. I just don't want to be a toxic male.
I'd want to know, who are the male influences in his life? Father, uncle, brothers. Are there positive male role models?
Okay, funny you should say that. I am divorced. His father and I'd say his uncle, I would put them in the toxic male realm. I have a wonderful husband who's totally opposite, so I would say he's a good influence and that kind of thing. So there's two different sides of what he sees and what he has to live with.
To learn more about the positive ways you can be male that aren't toxic. We don't discuss them very much in this culture. He needs to be exposed to positive male role models. Yeah, this narrative about toxic masculinity kind of dominates everything, and I hear the same thing, like these boys are afraid of being toxic, but they don't have an alternative. So if you've got a husband now who's an alternative model, promote that relationship for sure.
My son wants to save every animal on in the world, so he has his kindest heart, and so I know he doesn't have it in him to be toxic, but he doesn't necessarily want to be grouped in with all just a big, huge group of toxic males, that kind of thing.
The problem is that normal adolescent male traits like competitiveness or wanting to find your way in the hierarchy and wanting to position yourself in relationship to other men, those are all considered toxic now, and instead of being a normal part of adolescent male identity. So it's really challenging. Good luck. I'd be happy to talk to you also. Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
You guys can probably guess what I'm going to ask about. So, autosexual orientations such as autogynephilia and autoandrophilia are a major driver of gender dysphoria in Western individualist countries such as the US and Western Europe. And so I'm curious, which questions, when you have clients and patients, what do you ask them to determine whether they are either autogynephilic or autoandrophilic so that you can determine which of the two types of gender dysphoria syndrome they have?
My clients who are struggling with autogynephilia come to me because they know I work with that issue and they self-identify. I just start there. I'm not big on diagnosis. It's a shorthand to call it autogynephilia. Then you need to listen and you need to find out what that means. So I don't know if that answers your question, Phil, but that's the way I work.
I'm happy to try and address that. You know, I see the process of therapy as an unfolding, deepening of two people getting to know one another. I don't have a boilerplate list of questions that I ask everybody. I'm trying to get to know the individual client that I'm working with, and in the course of time, their desires, their fantasies, what drives their gender dysphoria, all of it will become revealed. And just like Stephen said, sometimes it takes years for someone to disclose the core issue. This has happened so many times in therapy that it takes much trust to share those things. So I can imagine, especially given the shame that Joe has addressed in his talk, even if you start your therapy off with a list of questions, you will likely get a lot of deceptive answers because people come to therapy with such conflicted feelings about what's really going on. So in an ideal world, if everyone was being completely straightforward and honest about all of their complex, deep, shameful issues, you could ask a list of questions and get all the information you need to help the client sort things out. But I don't find that that's usually how things go.
And I'd like to add in as well. I remember when I was first a therapist, I did have a boilerplate list of questions. And it was because I was a nervous, inexperienced clinician. And it was like my blankie. And the day I liberated myself from that and I realized actually I'm eating, very much like Stephen Levine has said, I'm eating human to human. That's when I came of age as a therapist, and I never went back. And I'd be very wary of any therapist that had a boilerplate list of questions.
Good evening. My name is Adam Vina. I'm from California. I lost my son 3 years ago to his mother grooming him from the age of 2 years old. And I have now been in the family court system for 3 years. I have not physically held my son because I spoke out against this. Because of me speaking out against this, the family court put a restraining order upon me because I spoke out against this. The family court judge ordered a gender assessment to be done on my 3-year-old son. He is now 5 years old now. His mother considers my son at 5 full transgender. He goes by she, her pronouns. He goes by the name of Violet. And I guess my question is for you, because I live in California, where do I go? Where do I go from here? I don't know, to be honest with you. I've completely lost my son, and nothing I have done in the last 3 years deserves the treatment that I have gotten from the state of California, the judges, the attorney on her side, the minors council. They have stripped me of all my father's rights. I've asked to sit down on the assessment at 3 years old. They denied me that. I went as far as hiring my own child therapist to sit in the assessment at Children's Hospital. They denied me that. They denied me a phone call from the doctor. Not one time has the state ever sat me down, or the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles sat me down as the father to ask me what I think is going on with my son. It has been one-sided with the mother on this. They have completely destroyed my son. And there's not anything that I can do, not amount of money that I can do to save my son of what the state of California has done for my son. I don't know what my question is for you, but legally, where as a father do I stand going up against the state of California? There's a lot more to my story. I've tried to pack 3 years, going on 4 years in this. So they've completely weaponized my stance against all this, against me.
I'd just like to say that I feel utterly helpless and infuriated listening to what you have to say, and I can only imagine that it's a tiny echo of what you feel, because there is nothing we can do to go up against the power of the state like that. And certainly therapists are useless in this regard, except maybe, to listen to you and your pain, but I'm really sorry. It's a horrible story.
Yeah.
I'm the same. I feel helpless and my heart goes out to you. And this is stories like you and yours is why we're here. It's why we're putting so much work in, and we're really trying to change things. So hopefully, the only kind of little piece of hope and glimpse of hope is your child is very young. And back in the day, when a child was 16 in 2016, nobody knew anything and they got led by the nose. There's a lot of information out there now, so he's got a lot of years ahead of him.
Hello? Okay. Hi, my name's Eddie. I'm a clinical psychologist. I was fortunate enough to come through my training before a lot of this started to come about. And I lay a significant proportion of what's been happening at the feet of our field. How do we reclaim that? Because we used to be much better at this than what's been happening.
Well, I remember there was a discussion a few years ago about these institutions that have been captured and what do we do about them, and should we try to retake them from within, and the person said, I can't remember who it was now, said we need to create alternative institutions. And I think that's what we're trying to do, and I think that that's evident here, and that's certainly what we're trying to do with the Gender Exploratory Therapy Association. So I invite you to become a member. The members that are here, there are a bunch of us. We're going to be meeting at 7:30 tomorrow in the restaurant for breakfast, and you're welcome to come and meet some of us.
And now we're going to have our, we're going to have our last question and then. Oh, okay.
I want to tell each one of you how much I, as a mom of a boy, young adult, appreciate the nuance with which you treat our sons. You don't box them into AGP or gay, but you understand there's many pathways and many things. But my question is for Joe. Specifically, you talked about shame, and I was wondering if in just like a minute or two you could elaborate a little bit more of the shame. Is it shame from porn or what? And what is the way out of the shame?
Yeah. I think that shame is a shorthand for thinking about it. It's feeling different in a bad way. And that can be, I think, autistic kids, for instance, often feel a lot of shame because they're just so different from everybody else. I think that gay boys feel shame because of their sexuality. Boys who just don't conform feel shame. So it's really it's feeling of being different in a bad way. And the way forward is to develop a sense of pride in the things about yourself that are your strengths. You can, that was my route to find ways to feel good about myself, even if I wasn't, athletic or macho or whatever. I think, I'd have to know about the boys, but helping them to find ways to feel good about themselves, to feel effective in their lives.
Can I comment on that?
Yeah. Yes, please do.
Take a very extraordinarily trivial example. At 11, I inadvertently ate a ham sandwich, and being a nice little Jewish observant boy, I suffered shame. I tell you this because a year or two later, my cognitive development about these rules that I was raised in allowed me to say, so what, I had a piece of ham. And so I want to say to you parents, the 15-year-olds, the 14-year-olds, et cetera, that cognitive development, education, exposure to other ideas helps us to grow and outgrow. If we're talking about the shame of being gay at 12, you see, if you talk to a 28-year-old who's gay, who's comfortable with that, that provides a stimulus for growth. Maybe my shame is not well-based, and I think we ought to have a hope based upon maturation, cognitive development, and education.
Thank you very much, everybody.